Real quick before we get into today's video, just want to thank all the people over on Patreon for all their support, because without their help, the upgraded content that you see on the channel, that you really see in the video essays and a few of the lore discussions, would not be possible without their help. But over on the Patreon, you get sneak peeks of videos months in advance. Patrons also get priority on the Q&As. Every 3 months we do an anime and manga haul, and I give away a lot of good goodies in that. And it's also just really cool to talk to you guys in the DMs. And if some of you guys have theories that you want me to talk about on the channel, obviously I will talk about your theories. Just send them to me over on the Patreon. But with that being said, let's get into the review. Yo, what's going on, everybody? It's your boy Naruto Explain here, bringing you guys another review for Boruto episode 250. And now that episode 250 is done in the books, we got a lot to talk about, especially given this new information that came from Masaya Honda in terms of explaining the episode. Originally, this episode was supposed to come before episode 249, but they decided to switch the order up. So now that we got that little bit of context kind of cleaned up right here, I have to say the decision to make this episode come after Boruto last week comes to the realization that they need to go to Chodro to try and stop any type of war from taking place. And he's realizing that there are actually people on the other side that, you know, their husbands, their wives, their brothers, sisters, fathers, and etc. And Boruto, for the first time last week, was shown kind of grappling. Well, this week we see more of that fallout. And what I like about this is that you see how complicated war is, because Araumi is hell-bent on continuing, but in this week's episode, the correction work done by the animators that kind of stepped in and cleaned up the episode, they did a very good job, in particular when it comes to the exaggeration of the characters, which that's one aspect of animation. Well, when it comes to exaggeration, they did a very good job of just showcasing the range of emotions a lot of these characters felt, because the Funato Clan in this episode further gets humanized, because we learn why Araumi is so hell-bent and why he's so obsessed with Chodro and so pissed off at him, because we got a glimpse at the last war, and essentially Araumi lost his wife in that war, which is the whole reason why he's so hell-bent on making sure that this war does not fall apart, because if he fails, it's essentially him failing his wife. His wife was basically killed in that last war. She was hit with a ice-style jutsu that essentially froze her, and she's at the bottom of the ocean, and Araumi goes to check on his wife. So I thought that was a nice bit of context right there, and it kind of placed more importance on Ikada as a character, because his mother, one of her dying words was essentially to make sure that Ikada grows up to be the next leader of the Funato, and that's why everybody's putting so much faith in him, because everybody knew that there was a huge potential for his power. So I like seeing that. I also like how, while Araumi is so hell-bent on continuing the war, you have Ikada, and Ikada starts the episode off where he's looking at his former plans to build a ship. And Ikada, as the episode continues to progress, is getting pushed further and further down the road of accepting his destiny as a Funato Clan soldier. And once he gets to that point where he accepts it, after seeing Siren basically kick the bucket because she's coughing blood, her wounds are reopened, essentially Ikada in that moment gives up on his dream to embrace the dream that his clan was pushing onto him. So I like seeing that, because again, that humanized Ikada a little bit more. And then when it comes to Isari, the older brother, I like that one of the things we saw with him is that all of this fighting and seeing his comrades dying, it's affected him in ways that it did not affect his father. His father is telling everybody to push forward, because in the back of his father's mind, failure and giving up on the seas essentially means giving up on his wife. And you have to remember that part of the reason why this whole war is taking place is because of the economic expansion, that quite a few people at the beginning of the arc were not a fan of what Chodro and the Mizukage were doing, and how this economic expansion into the seas and the machinery is gonna disrupt the way of life for a lot of people. The Funato are just the people that are able to actually take up arms and fight. Well, one of the things that we see is that Isari's like, it's time to stop the fighting. So he's willing to go as far as to go to Chodro and set up a peace treaty behind his father's back. And what I like about this is that we know, based off of some of the episode summaries that Boruto, that's one of the things that Boruto's going to try and do. So you're going to have two people telling Chodoro it's time to stop the fighting, but the problem here is that Isari has no say-so in making the Funato clan essentially give up. He's going to have to win over his father, and his father is not going to come to that realization. So I like seeing that. I also like how in this episode, one of the things that we see is that Kobuna, the son of Funamushi, he starts the episode off very cheery, a little bit pushing Ikada, saying like, why aren't you on the battlefield fighting? So many people are depending on you. One lady bursts up into tears because she's telling Ikada, like, I lost my husband, why aren't you out there? And you see how Kobuna, the kid that attacked Boruto last week, how he's transformed into it, because he went from just target practice to being a living example of what Pain and Madara stated, which is that people that know love, when they lose that love, they succumb to the hatred. And ultimately, it causes them to change and to do things that normally they wouldn't have done. And what I like about what this episode did is that when it got to those emotional moments, there was a lot of very good squash and stretch that happened in this episode to further convey those emotions. When you add that with the exaggeration, very well done. This arc is doing a very good job of just showcasing the human price of what it means to go to war, because like we know off screen that there have been thousands of people that have been slaughtered ever since Chodoro's joined the battlefield, but it happened off screen. But the deaths that we have seen on screen, there's been a visible impact on the members of the main cast. So continuing to highlight the human cost of war and what sacrifices are ultimately made when it comes to peace treaties, this is something very well done. And I mean, it's something that this new generation has to experience. I like how the anime is showcasing this from both sides. One other thing that I thought was very fascinating is how the next thing the episode does is the episode after Ikada is speaking to some of those Funato Clan women, which is a side note. The Funato Clan got some baddies in there, man. But like after Ikada is speaking to some of the women in the Funato Clan and trying to help them when it comes to building the ship materials, we have this very tense back and forth that goes on between Isari and with Araumi. And I thought that placing that scene after Ikada has that woman break down into tears in front of him, that was a very good move storytelling wise, because it just adds more to the emotional tension. And you see how when Araumi's just getting all these updates on how the war is going, since Chodoro's gone to the battlefield, the Funato have been losing ground, and you see how it's just pissing off Araumi at this point. And he's being told if they continue on the same space that they're on now, because they don't have the manpower, because they're stretched so thin right now, they're not going to be able to win this war at this level. They're going to have to abandon the sea. And I like how that clash of ideals that comes with Isari and with Araumi, it's just boiling over, and the emotional tension is so thick, and it gets to a point to where it feels like Isari might actually attack his father. And when he raises his weapon up against him, essentially Araumi looks over at him and says, I'm the one that gave you that weapon. It's not going to attack me, but you can try it if you want to. And the reason why I like this is that you're seeing more layers out of Araumi. Because we found out all that information about his wife, so much about his character makes sense now. So much of that makes sense, and it kind of makes you look at the fact that he's been separated from his family for 5 years because he was in prison. And so now he has extra incentive to try and rebuild his clan, to try and reclaim those seas. Now we see why that giant machine that is going to disrupt the ocean water and etc. Why Araumi is so hell-bent on stopping the mass production of things like that, because it's going to disrupt the seas, which means it's going to disrupt the burial place of his wife. This was good. Masaya Honda, the writer for this episode, there's so much that went into this that added so many layers to the members of the Funato. Now, I know some people have kind of felt like, hey, we should have got this information a little bit closer up hand. And I kind of feel like, based off of how the pacing of this arc has been, if you would have front loaded all this information with the Funato, it might not have been the best idea, because it might have slowed down the arc even more. I think where they have this now, this is going to be one of those arcs where you have all the information as we're headed towards the climax. It's going to make that final battle in the climax feel a lot more earned, because now you know the emotional stakes that the enemy side has, it's going to further add to the payoff. And the thing with writing arcs like this that take the approach of using a writing technique called funneling, where you start off very wide, and as you're going through the story, you're not sure how all the pieces fit together. You know that there's some overlap, but you can't really see it up front. But as you get closer towards the climax, everything begins to start slapping together. That's the approach they took with this arc. Now we know why Araumi and the Funato are so dead set, and you see how they're building up towards a potential peace treaty. Once we get to that point, there's going to be people on both sides that aren't necessarily happy with it. This is going to be an arc where you're going to have to go back and watch it once it's done, and you're going to be able to appreciate it more after everything's been presented to you. Some things you can't necessarily get the full enjoyment of it as you're going through it. Some things you have to kind of go back with hindsight. It's actually not a uncommon tactic to use in literature. It's a lot like the flash forward sequence, where just how you had in Boruto chapter 1/episode 1, you see the Boruto and Kawaki fight. You have a lot of stories that pull off that tactic, but it takes a very skilled writer to pull something like that off. It's the same thing when it comes to using the funneling method with storytelling. You have to be very skilled. A lot of shonen use a lot of basic storytelling methods. That's why when you do get series like, say, One Piece or Rurouni Kenshin, or even Bleach, that utilize the funneling method, because they break away from that method, and because they're paying off stuff that was set up in chapter 1 of the story, stuff that you didn't think was consequential, and because you're seeing the layers of the characters added later on, it's very hit or miss, and it only works if you have a talented writer doing it. I really wish that this entire arc was written by Masaya Honda. I wish there weren't as many hands in the kitchen, because episodes like this really showcase how talented of a writer he is. Now, moving back into the episode itself, between Araumi having this flashback where the foreshadowing is there, where he's telling his wife he doesn't like seeing a child on the battlefield, and now you get in the present time where, as he's going to the grave of his wife, you have earlier in the episode where he's openly getting pissed off over the fact that his daughter might die as well, and his youngest son, who potentially has the power to stop this war, is too big of a coward to use it. You see the frustration just boiling over and bubbling up into him, and the irony in it is that it takes Siren reopening the wounds on her body and coughing up blood and seemingly passing away in front of Ikada in order for Ikada to willingly give into that power. And the build up towards that, where you see him having his mental breakdown before that, very good. That just added to a huge layer of payoff to where you finally see Ikada in that transformed state where he's given into his power and he's given into his vengeance. It's kind of hard to believe that this is the same child that we saw earlier on in the arc, but I like it. I like how this arc very slowly was building up and showing you that every time he was getting upset, the seas themselves were seemingly changing along with his emotions. There's a sleeping power in him, and this episode's showing you he's willingly embraced that power now. Masaya Honda absolutely nailed the build up and the foreshadowing towards Ikada's true power being revealed at the end of this episode. What makes this reveal so earned is the fact that this was something that Ikada's own mother, Araumi's wife, was certain that her son had that power to be the leader of the Funato Clan one day, and we see Ikada willingly stepping into that. And it kind of makes you look at Araumi and his vow never to leave the sea a little bit differently, because again, just based off of how those machines are going to be expanding, at one point the grave where Araumi's wife has been essentially buried in the sea, where he goes to visit her and he drops those pearls down at her grave. That's going to get disrupted by those machines, and it kind of gives you something else to look at. It's not just the lives of the people on those islands who are changing, but you also have people like Araumi who pretty much worship the sea, like how you had in the Sasuke Shinden novel, where there are people that worship the nature on the islands of the land of water, and they were really conflicting with the feudal lord over different things that were going on. It's the same thing here. And when you look at even in the real world, you have some religions and customs where people's loved ones are buried out at sea. And so it goes back to the earlier question that was asked at the beginning of this arc. Is the progress that's going to benefit the majority of the people worth trampling on the lives and customs of those who you're ultimately going to be affecting? This arc is showing you that there are no right or wrong sides. Both sides have suffered heavy losses. One side is fighting for the expansion that's going to better the country as a whole and make it more competitive. Same side has ignored some of these lesser islands, like the island where Hebi Ichigo grew up on, and basically left them for themselves. It's very much a class-based system, which the light novels touch on, which makes those episodes hit a lot harder. That's a side that means well, but it's a side that doesn't have everything figured out as well because it's so focused on progress. With the idea and acceptance that sometimes for progress' sake, sometimes people have to be left behind. But to make a decision like that, just at what cost? Is it really worth leaving those people behind? The other side is fighting to maintain a way of life, but their dream of maintaining their own status quo has led to some of them crossing lines where they're attacking people that are more in line with what the Mizukage and the feudal lord envision for the future of the country. No one's right, no one's wrong. And that's the beauty of the complexity of what's going on with this arc. And it makes those moments like when Siren is breaking down into tears at the prospect of Ikada lying to her about they finally fought and won and beat the Hidden Mist village. She needs that based off of everything that they sacrificed just to get up to this point. But it makes you wonder, when the peace treaty is ultimately struck, can people like Kyoho and Bunten actually forgive the Funato? That's what makes Pain and Madara and even Sasuke, when Sasuke spoke to Naruto, that's what makes their arguments seem somewhat valid, because there are problems that can't be fixed by just sitting down and talking to people and preaching these feel-good ideas of what a perfect world should be. Rainbows don't last forever. You see more storms than you do sunny days with rainbows. This entire episode did a lot for humanizing the Funato Clan. And it's not something that we've seen with, say, some of the manga content that was adapted. If you just go by the manga material, a lot of those characters are one-dimensional. The anime added extra layers to some of them. And you had great writing examples with characters like Victor. And you saw more added to characters like Mujino. You saw Honda write more layers emotionally to stuff like Kawaki's backstory, where we learn about how Kawaki fell into the hands of Jigen, and add more layers to Kurama's death to make that more of an emotional scene. Episodes like this and episodes like those really show you that Masaya Honda knows what he's doing as a writer. So my question to you guys is, out of all the members of the Funato Clan in this episode that got the development, who do you think got the most development? Who are you the most sympathetic towards? Let me know down in the comment section below. So always, guys, if you like anything I had to say, don't forget to comment, rate, subscribe, and share. Thank you so much for watching to the end. Have an awesome day, guys.